Hi. Uh, I'm not sure if the audio is recording, but I want to give a home tour on Google Earth of my hometown of Bridgeport, Connecticut. I have no idea what I'm doing. So, Bridgeport is about an hour from the massive metropolis that is New York City, which you probably have heard of. It is, in fact, the largest city in the United States and the second largest metropolitan area in the country. A metropolitan area is simply the area of influence of a city. You could essentially say that it is everything that the central city, every part that really works around the orbit of a central city. For example, Philadelphia, people from King of Prussia. King of Prussia, you could say, is a suburb of Philadelphia because many people would originally, perhaps less so with the development of edge cities, but that's a story for another time. But many people, I assume, and is probably true, commute to central city Philadelphia every day on the highways from King of Prussia. It is a similar case here in the Northeast where many people commute to New York, to Jersey City, and to the suburbs of the edge cities, what you would call, of White Plains and Stamford, Connecticut, where these are smaller cities, but many corporations, as you can see, they have a smaller urban footprint than the massive, massive sprawl of NYC. But they exist essentially as corporations moved away from the cities in the 70s after highways were invented, as a form of leaving the congestion of the central city and living the American dream in suburbs. Now, up the coast is the city of Bridgeport. Now, Bridgeport was founded originally as a small town right after the American Revolution, a small borough, and is named after this bridge here, which connected this peninsula from this landmass right here, and there's a city on 5 peninsulas, as you can see here. It has Black Rock, the Seaside Park Peninsula, East Bridgeport, or the East Side, and it used to be called Pembroke in the 1800s, and the East End or Newfield, depending on who you ask. Those are the names of these kind of peninsulas, which, as you can see, make up Bridgeport. Now, Bridgeport is considered part of the New York metropolitan area, but more specifically, it is also home to its own metropolitan area, which encompasses all of Fairfield County, Connecticut. Now, Fairfield County includes Bridgeport, which is its largest city, its most populated, with a population of about 150,000 in its 16 square miles. Stamford, which has a much larger land area, but is actually a slightly less populated city. It has grown a lot in the last 50 years, while Bridgeport has been losing population. Still, it hasn't caught up to Bridgeport, and is still the second largest city in both the state and Fairfield County. Fairfield County being the primarily wealthy part of the state. There are smaller cities such as Norwalk and Danbury, which surprisingly does not have 3D view in Google Earth yet as well. Now, as you can see here, Bridgeport is surrounded by the neighboring suburbs of Stratford, which, as you can see here, it's mostly single-family homes and very dense patterns of development, actually. Part of this was actually developed before the 1800s, especially the parts on the border with Bridgeport. You see actually incorporate more urban elements. You could actually say they're more urban neighborhoods. But those don't last very long, and once you get well into the town suburban character is fully established. But you notice it appears more gray than Fairfield. Now, Fairfield is a wealthy town. It's one of the wealthiest towns in the nation, and the average in this town is over $150K a year for its residents. But it's a very leafy green town, you can see from the sky, and it is home to both two universities. Well, actually, one is on the border with Bridgeport, and has many of its dormitories there, but it is home to two universities within its limits, and suburban sprawl. Now, if you were to compare this to the West Coast, it's it's interesting because let's say the Santa Clara Valley. My bad. Um, you see here the homes in San Francisco. San Francisco's a very dense city, has a population of 600,000 people, and you can see here it's actually the architecture here. It's mostly attached townhomes side by side with one another, and they're very densely built. It's a very densely built town. But then you look at the suburbs here, essentially Silicon Valley, which really actually for some reason is all the way over here. But you look at the sprawl and you see the houses are actually more attached to each other than up in Fairfield County, and that actually has to do more with the fact that it's actually farther away from New York City than the Jersey suburbs. And if you look at the Jersey suburbs, it follows the same pattern of development. Very dense suburbs. Very actually, Jersey is often very crosses the line between what could be considered a suburb, what could be considered. But Jersey is essentially Jersey and California are two states that come to mind when it comes to suburbia. Now, the suburbia in Connecticut is far less dense. I guess that's why you'd hear people wanting to move to Connecticut to get away from density and city life, but bordering these towns of Fairfield and then Easton, which is what you would call an exurb, really, because it's at all the way at the end of a metropolitan area. It's far away from New York. It's not far from Bridgeport, but it didn't see much development. Bridgeport being a smaller city, and Easton is mostly actually mansions. There is actually a law in this town that I forgot what it's called. It's a 3-something law, where essentially the lot sizes here are actually 3 times the average, and they have to be, and you're not allowed to build. See, this is where zoning comes into play in places, because, for example, if you were to look at parts of Bridgeport, the parts that were built after the Second World War, these are suburban homes, single-family homes, built in the suburban. These are suburban homes, but the lot sizes are smaller compared to Easton, where the lot sizes are bigger. You can actually see that, much bigger, and you have, So, by the way, this is the Easton Reservoir, which provides water to the region. The corporate headquarters of the company that owns the Easton Reservoir is right here. Actually, the Aquarion Water Company, which is the 7th largest water company in the United States, is based in Bridgeport, and it provides water to 6 states. It actually provides the headquarters are there, and it was originally founded as the Bridgeport Hydraulic Company, but today it provides it serves communities in Connecticut, in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont, right? That's where your water comes from. Yes, Bridgeport's densely built neighborhoods. This is the Hollow neighborhood, and this is the densest neighborhood in the city of Bridgeport. And you can see the architecture. It's mostly 3-story homes. These homes are arguably triple deckers. These are all triplexes. I actually grew up on this street until I was 2. I don't remember it, but I lived on the street, coincidentally. So this neighborhood is actually, I think it's 40% foreign born. So it's a neighborhood. This is, again, I guess you could say Bridgeport is one of those magnet cities that immigrants, when they come to this country, tend to settle in. And it's a city where 30% of the population was born in another country. Now, to see the size of this neighborhood, actually, so as you can see here, it's bound by, this actually isn't part of the Hollow. For some reason it includes it, but in the traditional definition it's not. It includes everything west of Park Ave, east of Park Ave and south of North Ave, and you can see the architecture. And what's always fascinated me is the mix of different styles that build up an urban neighborhood. Now, this neighborhood was built. If you look at the history, if you look at old maps of this town, the grids were already established by like the 1880s. So between 1880s to like 1910s, this neighborhood was infilled, and by the 1910s, you could say that this neighborhood was completely built. The first part of this neighborhood to be built, not many homes of which remain, was the Sterling Hill neighborhood. You could see there's actually very nice homes. Well, that's because originally this place was where the wealthy Englishmen sat until the Irish arrived in the 1840s. The first large um, wave of immigration to the city began, and the Irish, escaping the potato famine, settled in these parts and started uh, lived here in tenements, and some of which were old mansions that were split up, and some of which were, well, tenements that were, for example, let me find an example of one of those tenements. Tenements like these, or these three-story buildings, right? One family would live on the first floor, one on the second floor, one on the third floor, which actually doesn't look spacious, but it actually is. Because then here, one room would be here, one room would be here, and then I remember mine being on a third floor when I lived on the third floor. There would be a living room here. My room would be here. Here would be the washing machine and the kitchen. Here would be the dining room, and that might actually have been back here. Actually, here would have been the living room, or actually might have been the two rooms where me and my parents lived, and then here would have been the living room. But either way, they're actually not that small. And so this is the predominant type of home you'll actually see throughout the city, really, which I think is interesting. This is the West End neighborhood, which we'll look into shortly, which is another neighborhood I grew up in. This is Black Rock, by the way. Black Rock is actually it's very interesting because there aren't very many neighborhoods really anywhere like it. Now, Black Rock is the namesake of Black Rock Turnpike, which is a road that starts in Fairfield here, and just above the neighborhood, and ends all the way up in either Reading or Bethel. Anyways, it connected these inland towns to the port, which was at Black Rock, which is here and is actually still an industrial port, just not very utilized because later in the 1800s, the main port once Bridgeport developed, became the port here at the mouth of the Pequannock River. That is because this land was presumably, I'd assume that since there was well, I don't presume this is true. There was a Native American village called Pequannock, part of the Paugussett people, which were an Pequot speaking people. No, my bad. It might have been an Algonquin speaking. No, actually, oh man, I'm lacking so much knowledge. So, anyways, there was a reservation here, and they were removed and put up to Sterling Hill which was actually called Golden Hill by the Native Americans. This was a sacred site of theirs until we kicked them out again, and the Irish moved in. Sadly, the Native Americans, there aren't many left in this tribe, the indigenous peoples, but they can still be found. They have a reservation building in Trumbull. Members are maybe about 100 or so. Sorry for not being able to provide accurate information. I will redo this or cut this, or I don't know why I'm filming this. This is just because I'm bored and I've always wanted to do this. Well then, now, past the hollow, we have the west side neighborhood of the city. This was originally part of Fairfield, annexed by the city of Bridgeport in the 1880s, and didn't really start to develop until the early 1900s. I'd say about 1920 is when really this entire section was developed. Again, during the city's boom, when it went from 70,000 people to 150,000 people in like 3 decades. So you see here, this part in particular is called the Stratfield Historic District. Now, I once lived in that building. About 3 years ago, I moved out with my family, but this is this is the this is what's called the Stratfield Historic District, and you can see that the homes here are actually different in that they are not three-story triplexes like, right here, a couple blocks to the west and a couple blocks to the east they are triplexes, but here they are simply what seem to be old mansions. Homes for the elite, the factory owners, and these were streetcar suburbs, and there would be streetcars that would connect, because again, basically these entire neighborhoods were built before the advent of cars. Cars didn't exist when these neighborhoods were being filled up, so streetcars would connect that part of town to the center city downtown, which again used to be far denser, but much of it was demolished for parking lots, or that failed mall, which became Housatonic Community College. Or why did they build the strip mall downtown? But that was once a Holiday Inn that was like 8 stories tall. I don't. It was demolished before I was born, way before I was born, like 20 years before I was born. But it failed. So this is again along State Street. There's there's a larger maybe Bangladeshi and Hindustani population, which is the name that the British gave to the region of India, Pakistan, the collective region of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh is Hindustani, and there is a noticeable Hindustani presence in this part of town. And this was originally settled actually by this part was originally settled by French Canadians, Swedish, and Slovenians, the west side part of the city. And the west end part of the city, well, essentially, especially this part, which used to be, a neighborhood until they destroyed it and built the highway and then built all of these lovely industrial parks. And the housing complex is very poorly designed. I mean, there's no green space. It's not walkable. It's all cars. It's such a... I mean, we're really shaped by the environments that we're in, and man, it just really sucks that the residents really can't walk around without seeing concrete, and it's just very poorly done. It's definitely, from an urbanist perspective, it's not great. This is my first time doing this. I'm also sick, and I'm also very nervous. I'm also not paying attention, and I'm just spitting out words, and I'm not even paying attention to what I'm saying, so I might say a bunch of things wrong. But anyways, east of, actually today, this part, I guess you could say, of town that is west of Howard Avenue, which is here, is actually one of the two majority Mexican, not majority, but about, we're the largest ethnic group. There's actually, very few of these neighborhoods actually have a majority. Bridgeport is only about 20% white, and it's 80% people who identify as Hispanic, which could be of any race, and Asians, Native Americans,